Hello and welcome back to Just Megalise, a podcast about healing, remembering who you are, and diving into deeper alignment. I'm Meg, and I'll be your host. During today's episode, I wanted to talk about learning to sit in discomfort, whether it's our own discomfort or the discomfort of others. So I wanted to talk about what it means to stay with your feelings, to stay with any tension or anxiety, especially in moments where we tend to flee or numb instead of working to fix it. Right? Like sometimes our go-to mechanism is to flee or to run or to numb in different ways, whether that's scrolling on your phone, watching TV, smoking, drinking, whatever your numbing article of choice is, right? And I'm not saying that that's bad. We have to start to bring compassion and forgiveness into the coping mechanisms that we've picked up throughout our life. They're not inherently bad, but we do need to start to look at the emotions that we're feeling and start to comfort ourselves. Because nobody else can do that for us. That's what I finally started to realize. Nobody else can comfort you through a bad time. Yes, don't get me wrong. There's sometimes like friends who can come and talk to you or give you a hug. All of those things are helpful. But at the same time, none of those things are going to be fully helpful unless you accept it in your mind. And yes, friends and family can comfort us. We can get hugs from loved ones. They can sit with us and listen to what we're going through. All of those things are helpful. But at the same time, we have to start to comfort ourselves. The best comfort, the best medicine, the best love comes internally. It has to come from internally. I heard somebody say the other day that like trying to get somebody else to love themselves when they don't is like throwing rocks into a ravine. Yeah, you might think that you're helping, but unless that person actually starts to believe it, nothing that you say is really gonna help. Like it really is throwing rocks into a ravine. It might be helping temporarily, maybe in the moment, but that person has to start to believe those things themselves. It all starts internally. You have to start speaking back to those really negative thoughts that we sometimes have. That's why sitting in discomfort is often so uncomfortable. A lot of times when we're having a hard time, we start to have thoughts like, I'm not worthy of love, everything always goes wrong for me, stuff like that. But we have to start to look at those things when they're coming up and learn to sit with them. Another thing that comes up too is like, let's say somebody comes to you with a grievance that, hey, you did this thing and it hurt my feelings. A lot of times thoughts of shame will come up, and then we'll go into a shame spiral, and then that makes us shut down. And in the past, it has shut me down to the point where I couldn't apologize to that person. We have to start being able to sit with that discomfort. We're going to do things that hurt other people, whether we mean to or not. I've talked about this in previous episodes, but we have to start being able to be comfortable to sit in the discomfort that might bring. And there's going to be discomfort that comes from many different aspects of our life. It could be a friend acting a little weird and really it has nothing to do with us, but we're uncomfortable because we're like, have I done something wrong? It could be a disagreement in a relationship. It could be somebody coming to you with a grievance. It could be you have a grievance with somebody, but you haven't fully expressed that yet. It could be so many different things, but we have to start being able to sit with those emotions. And I'm going to walk you through what I typically do that's helpful to see if it's helpful for you as well. So the first thing that I started doing is I started naming, what are you feeling right now, Megan? What are you feeling? And the feelings and emotions wheel is super helpful for this. I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but like look it up on Google. It says like, if you're sad, it could actually boil down to this, disappointment or frustration or whatever. And so look that up and really find the emotion that boils down to truly what you're feeling, because that is so helpful to understand, okay, I'm not mad, I'm actually disappointed, or I'm not sad, I feel betrayed. Whatever it is, it's really helpful to understand what you're feeling. Now I don't even need the feelings and emotions wheel to look at it because I've become so good at understanding what is it that you're feeling right now, Megan. But that feelings and emotions wheel is so helpful right at first. So then once I realize what I'm feeling, then I ask myself, where are you feeling this within the body? So a lot of times, like if you're feeling anxious, you'll feel it in your chest or your belly. But figuring out like when you're feeling certain emotions, the body tends to tense up in certain areas. That's why when people talk about the chakras, this is a real thing. These are energetic fields within the body. And when we're feeling certain things, or maybe our chest gets tight or our belly gets tight, but finding where in the body am I feeling this emotion? And then what I do is I start to breathe into that area. So I take a nice deep inhale and I almost imagine almost like a magical energy flowing into that area. And then when I exhale, the energy dispersing from that area. Okay. I will tell you, a lot of times during this step, I will start to cry, but that's a good thing. Crying is such a cathartic and energetic release. And if you need to scream, go and scream into a pillow. If you need to write feverishly in a journal and rip it out and ball it into a circle and throw it against the wall, like whatever you need to do, that's a healthy form of emotional expression. Do that. Do that. And then often after that, after I kind of breathe and I allow the body to relax, sometimes I'll journal about it. But the last step that I've started integrating, and this is really important, but a lot of times people don't talk about this last step, is like therapists don't even focus on this last step. Therapy mostly focuses on, okay, why are you feeling this emotion? How does that make you feel, etc. Like the first part of what we talked about, like the feelings and emotions, well, figuring out why I feel this way, where did it first come from, etc. And maybe the journaling portion of like journaling your feelings and diving a little bit deeper into that discomfort. But this is the step that a lot of people ignore, is doing some sort of physical activity to release that emotion and release the physical sensation that that emotion has brought within the body. So what I'll do is sometimes I get up and I just start like shaking my hands, or I'll start jumping up and down, or just something. Another thing that's been really helpful is I have a vibration plate. So all you do is stand on it, or you can sit on it, or like kneel on it, or you can also like do a push-up on it. But it's so helpful because it like shakes my entire body. And once I get off of that thing, whether it's a minute or 5 minutes, my body just feels so much more relaxed. And so there is truth and science to this. Please read the book, The Body Keeps a Score. When we're holding in our emotions, they get trapped in the body. And that's why over time you might be feeling tense in a certain part of the body because you've had these emotions that you haven't allowed yourself to release. Okay? And numbing isn't really helping. It's just prolonging that journey. And also, you can go back to previous things that maybe you haven't fully processed, and you should. I encourage that you should. You can go back to possible things that you haven't processed yet. Maybe it was an argument with a friend a year ago, 10 years ago, whatever, and trying to work to process that. How did I feel? How do I still feel? Where do I feel that in the body? Okay, can I do some just slight deep breathing? So can I picture that energy flowing into the body wherever I'm holding tension, and then when I exhale, just picturing it almost like an energy exiting the body. What I picture it as is, it's like a white, beautiful healing energy flowing into wherever I'm feeling the tension. And then when I exhale, I almost picture it like a mist that's coming out my mouth with the exhale, and then the mist kind of floats down to the earth to be recycled back into the earth or back into love, whatever you want to picture. And it's so helpful. It's so helpful because a lot of times what we're numbing is the feeling. Yes, it's the thoughts that we're numbing as well, but it's the feeling. And if you can get rid of that feeling with just a few short, deep breaths, like why wouldn't you try that, you know? So another thing is emotion regulation. It's not about perfection. It's just about presence. It's about being with yourself in those hard moments and not abandoning yourself when you're having tough, deep emotions. And this also kind of ties into shadow work. We tend to avoid the parts of ourselves that we see as dark or hard to process, you know? And sometimes we see our sadness as being like dark, and I don't want to look at that, and I can't look at that right now. And it's not healthy in the long term because you're not helping yourself. Those things are still going to be there. You're just burying them deep down, you know? And then you got to dig them up later. Why not just deal with it when the moment arises? And it becomes so much easier to do that over time. I've become so good at this over time. I don't allow my emotions to fester anymore. At least I try not to. Like when I had that friendship breakup recently, I allowed myself to feel sad for like a week. There was days that I cried almost all day, and I would journal and I would cry some more and I would breathe. Like I had a hard time of it. I was having a really hard time of it, but that's okay. I allowed myself to feel it. And now I feel so much better about that experience. Yeah, I hate how it happened. I'm still very sad about it, but I'm not as deeply sad and emotional as I was when it first happened. You know, like that has been dispersed because of the work that I did. And also another thing I want to talk about today is that you are not responsible for somebody else's emotions. That includes your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, your caregivers, whatever. You are not responsible for their emotions, okay? This is not to say, please do not misunderstand, this is not to say that you can speak to people however you want, you can put them down, and however they choose to interpret that, that's on them. That's not what I'm saying. We have to be still compassionate and tactful when we're speaking to people. And if people have come to us and said, listen, this thing that you did, it hurt me, we need to be responsive to that and look to apologize and possibly change our behavior. I've talked about this more in previous episodes, but what I am saying is, let's say a partner is really angry over something that happened at work. Yes, you're allowed to try and comfort them and be there for them, but their emotions, those are not your responsibility. They have to work through that. You cannot work through that for them. That is on them. And I especially use this example for like children who are parentified from a young age. Sometimes some children, they had parents who like made their emotions your responsibility. And they never said it directly. It was more like an implied thing. Like it's a projection of the parent, grandparent, caregiver, sibling, whatever. It's a projection of their feelings. Like they made the child feel like you made me sad, or you made me angry because you didn't put the dishes away, or you weren't perfect, or you didn't get perfect grades. That's not really the child's fault. It's a lack of emotion regulation on the side of the parent, the caregiver, the sibling, whatever. But the child is then expected to comfort, calm, or take care of that person. And this is such a common thing. Otherwise, love is withheld from the child. The child learns to manage their parent, their caregiver, their sibling's mood. And this can also happen when the parent especially when the child is younger, when they overvent about their worries, their fears, or their conflicts, when it's not the child's responsibility to deal with that, right? The parent has to deal with that on their own. And this process, it's called parentification, where it's teaching the child to ignore their own needs and focus on the emotion regulation of the parent, caregiver, etc. And so then what happens is the child carries that mechanism with them into adulthood, and they try and fix other people's emotions without realizing that they're even doing it. They're very focused outward on, how can I fix this? How can I help this person? And don't get me wrong, sometimes that trait, as long as it's not a parentification trait, that trait of wanting to help others, that's a beautiful thing. But what oftentimes happens is that person who is a parentified child then ignores their own needs in favor of other people. And they do it throughout their life over and over and over. They're very good at trying to manage the emotions of others, which you can't do, and they're not your responsibility. And instead, they ignore the emotions of themselves. They are masters at ignoring the emotions of themselves, masters at ignoring the discomfort that they might be sitting in. So that's what I mean when I say you are not responsible for the emotions of others. I'm not taking it to the extreme of you can say whatever you want to another person and it doesn't matter if they get upset. That's not your responsibility. That's not what I'm saying. We still have the responsibility to be compassionate and tactful with people. But what I am saying is, it is not your responsibility to rescue another person. It is your responsibility to rescue yourself. That is the only person we can change, is ourselves. It is your responsibility to focus on this person. How is this person doing? What does this person need? That is your responsibility. Obviously, there's nuance with this, if you have children, especially if they're younger, you do have to model emotion regulation for them. For them to be able to learn those skills in themselves. And especially at first, you might be a little bit responsible for coming in and helping them regulate their emotions, right? So that's a different conversation. But for the average adult, it is not your responsibility to rescue another person, okay? And you need to stop abandoning yourself in favor of others. So you guys know I love journaling prompts. Here are some to help you with this. Who first taught me that it was my job to regulate another person? When someone is upset, I often feel fill in the blank. Maybe you feel sad, maybe you feel anxious. Okay, why is that? Because that's not your emotions. So why are we feeling anxious? Is it possible that maybe you were around a person who made it feel like it was your job to regulate their emotions at some point in your life? Perhaps. Here's another one. The story I tell myself when another person is upset is, what is that? That it's my fault? Because it's not. Is that perhaps a story that you tell yourself? Is another story that it's my responsibility to fix them or help them through this or to manage or regulate their emotions? That is also not your responsibility, but is it possible that you're telling yourself that? We have to become very aware of the thoughts that we're telling ourselves and start to shift and work to change those thoughts. Here's the last one. What would it feel like if I trust in their own capacity to regulate their emotions instead of trying to fix them? I'm going to repeat that one again because it's important. What would it feel like to trust in that person's capacity to regulate their own emotions instead of me trying to fix or rescue them? Another thing that just came to mind is, let's say you've set a boundary with somebody. You set a boundary with your parent, your friend, your partner, whatever it is, and they don't like that boundary. They start to get upset with you. That is a perfect example of how their emotions are not your responsibility. You setting a boundary, that's for you, and boundaries are healthy. And if somebody is getting upset because you're setting a boundary, quite frankly, that's the sign that I needed that boundary was needed. And you getting upset about that, them getting upset about that, that is not on you. It's not your responsibility to manage that. It's not your responsibility to explain further why you need that boundary. None of that is on you. So that is a perfect example of, we often feel like somebody else's discomfort is like our responsibility to fix or rescue, especially if their discomfort came from maybe a boundary that we set, and we feel it's then our responsibility to like over-explain and rescue them and maybe I'll take it back. I don't need that boundary after all, never mind. Because we feel responsible for their emotions. We're not. You are not. You are not responsible for another person's emotions. And this also applies to, let's say, you're coming to somebody and saying, this thing that you did, it really hurt my feelings, and they get angry at you. Again, not your responsibility. You do not need to rescue them. You do not need to pull back and say, well, I guess it didn't hurt me that bad. It's not your responsibility. They need to be able to sit with that. Yes, I have tremendous compassion for people who are struggling with thoughts of shame when they start to shame spiral, because I've been there. But there's a difference between having compassion for somebody else and self-abandoning. We can sometimes have so much compassion and empathy for another that we abandon ourselves. I'm no longer doing that, and neither should you. There's a line there. Yes, we need more compassion and empathy in the world, abso-frickin-lutely, but not when it comes at the abandonment of ourselves. Point blank, period. So I want to do one short grounding practice to teach you guys. Anytime you're feeling this, like you have a moment where you're like maybe uncomfortable because of the feelings of others and you start to feel like you need to rescue them, here's what I want you to do. I want you to inhale and say to yourself, this belongs to them, and then exhale and say, and I return it to them with grace. Okay, so let's do it together now. Inhale. This emotion belongs to them. Exhale. And I return it to them with grace. Inhale once more. This emotion belongs to them. Exhale, and I return it to them with grace. So thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Please remember that you are important and you need to start prioritizing yourself. What does this person need? And learning to start to give that to yourself. Is it comfort? Is it love? Is it more support? You can give those things to yourself. You can start with affirmations. And we have to start reparenting ourselves, because you're going to be your own parent through the rest of your life. And I would like it to be a nice voice. You deserve that. You deserve a kind inner voice. And yes, it takes time. It does. It takes time. It takes repetition. I'm not going to lie to you, but it is so worth it once you start to see the benefits of that. And especially when you're feeling discomfort and you're looking to numb, stop, just pause for a moment and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? Where am I feeling it in the body? And then try to work to disperse that emotion or that feeling. And then journal, cry, scream, go for a run, go for a walk, whatever makes you feel better. Do that. Make yourself a cup of tea, whatever it is. But stop burying your emotions. Stop burying the discomfort, because it's still going to be there, I promise you. And oftentimes it's going to come out through bouts of anger and through severe nervous system dysfunction because you've been pushing it down for so long. Trust me, I've been there. Sending you so much love, friend. And if you want to go deeper on your healing journey, there are so many different ways to connect. My book, Don't You Dare, is available for purchase on Amazon. If you want to learn more about the ego voice or dive into shadow work, I think it's an excellent tool for that. I also have my most loved meditation bundle available for purchase. These are my highest rated meditations over the years. I also have a new course called the Affirmation Reset course. This course helps you to rewire negative and limiting beliefs. And by the way, everything that I'm talking about, it's going to be linked below in the show description notes. And one thing that I noticed, unfortunately, is like the show notes, they're not very long. So even when you expand them, sometimes they don't show the links. And before I was putting like a link to everything, but I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put one link to one account that will like bring you to everything. So once you click that link, it'll show you my socials, it'll show you the purchase for the book, it'll show you the bundle, everything. So I'm just going to put one link moving forward because I do think on certain platforms I'm not able to add a certain amount of text. So just keep that in mind. I also offer one-on-one coaching and hypnotherapy services. If you're interested in a session with me, please either click that link or go to my website, meganshirey.com, meganshirey.com. I teach a free live guided meditation every Sunday morning on the Insight Timer app at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, 8 Mountain, 7 Pacific. And please also join us on Patreon for exclusive meditations, behind-the-scenes reflections, and a soft healing community space. And if you enjoy these episodes, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and please leave us a review. It helps us to reach more people and expand this community. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be joyous and at ease, sending you infinite love and light. And until next time.